Right. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Any agenda changes?
This morning I did have the addition of two resolutions, G and H, the approval to turn over uncollected taxes to the city and county treasurers, along with the approval to turn over the uncollected flower memorial taxes. Two additions.
Okay. Thank you. Public comments. Sure. I just want to remind you it's 3 minutes. We need your name and your address, and if you could avoid talking about anything personal. First.
Yep. So, good evening. I apologize the first time I ever attended a school board meeting or ever spoken at a school board meeting. My name is Dale Herman. I live at 204 Green Street, which is right at the bottom of the hill here. I want to bring to your attention, it's my understanding that school boards set policy and there's an expectation that administration, staff, students will follow those policies. I believe my grandson is being bullied in your school. There's been at least 8 instances since October in which he has either been hit or spoken to by others. He's gone to the principal, been evaluated at the nurse's office at least twice for concussion protocol. The other day, he was struck at the principal's office, went to the nurse's office. When he came back, the girl came up to him and handed him something in a wrapper. He brought it to our house. My wife had to explain to him why he was holding a woman's tampon. He came home one day and asked his mother what a pedophile was, because she goes, why? She said, that's what the kids are calling me at school. Now, Maslow's hierarchy of needs says if a person isn't safe, they're not going to learn. I know you have a school program for lunches, free breakfast, backpack program so kids can be nourished so they can be in a learning environment and be able to concentrate on their studies. I'm sure my grandson isn't the only kid that's being bullied in your school, because I witnessed it one day. I was walking from door 3 at Case up to Green Street, and there was a kid on the ground and 3 other people were kicking and punching him. And when I said, is there a problem here? They all stood up. Nope, no problem. I killed this food. I just wanted you folks to be aware, because I'm sure nobody wants to be on the CBS News that there's a problem in a school where kids are bullied, and we just saw something that happened in Michigan, Minnesota, somewhere else. We don't want it happening. So I thought I'd bring this to your attention so that either A, the policy isn't being followed, or B, the policy is broken and needs to be adjusted, or programs need to be put into place so kids aren't touching each other inappropriately on the school day, on school property, during school events. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and sorry that your grandson is not feeling safe in school. Anybody else?
I just want to get my phone number.
Sure.
I'm just going to hand you my phone number.
That's his mom.
We just need to call tomorrow because I know we don't do a public session, but we definitely will take care of it. Okay? Thank you. Thank you for coming back.
Thank you.
Communications?
I have a few communications this evening. I did receive some communication after the Hall of Achievement induction. A couple of the recipients did reach out. Dear Mrs. Lamar, thank you so much for the excellent induction ceremony last evening. I totally appreciate the variety of achievements honored during the program. I regret not being able to attend in person. Nonetheless, the program was a wonderful reminder of all the things we treasure in the Watertown school system through the years. This consistent striving for excellence is clearly evident. Best regards, Dr. Ellen Percy. And we did hear from William Pbis as well. He watched the induction presentation and shared with his family, including his brother Tim, who is also a Watertown High graduate. A huge thank you for all the time and effort and care you obviously put into it. Please extend my thanks to your team and the students. A really great production, and it was fun to learn about everyone's path. It's very meaningful to me, and I hope it is with your students. And most of all, I hope the education team gets inspiration from what they do every day, since so much of the credit for any accomplishments is due to all of you. We did receive a communication from the Food Bank of Central New York. It is a certificate of appreciation for maintaining the school pantry during the early days of the pandemic.
Moving on to board and staff reports. We'll start with Susie for the F&F report.
So, Josh told us to be submitting the ESSA application, the ESSA statistics. We got a copy of that to see where our school stands. He also went over the tax cap, which is going to go over in this meeting. This is announcing that she started negotiations with the boss. They've also started talking about budget.
We haven't started the negotiations yet, but that's up this year, so we will be starting that.
Gotcha. We discussed a little bit about subs shortages, but also discussed how we keep this on target with what other districts are offering as far as compensation. And that's about it.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to behavior data.
So tonight we'll give you a big overview of a snapshot since 2018-19, and then going forward 2020, 2021, and then this year up through November. You can take a look at Case, Wiley, and the high school, and this just gives you the total number of behavioral referrals at each school. It doesn't give you the details. So we're going to, probably not at our next meeting in December, but we're going to be talking about academics in December and then January. But going forward, the next thing is we'll drill down, because you're seeing a big snapshot. But if you look at whether you look at just the charts, or you start to look at the bar graphs, and you look, for example, in the different years, you will also, when you drill down to each school, if you flip it, you can see the total for Wiley, Case, in the high school each year. Taking a look at the year 2021, seeing a huge decline, and then knowing that we had 1,000 students that were on remote that year, but the students that were in session were on a hybrid model. So instead of having 16 to 24 students in a classroom, you had half that number. So as you take a look at where we're at, and even if you flip to the next page, it talks about monthly referrals, and we'll look at the high school. But I shared with you high school, Wiley, and Case, because you'll start to see patterns. For example, really, if you look at the monthly referrals at any of the schools, you'll start to see that when kids come back, yes, there are referrals in the beginning of the school year in September, but in October, there's usually a spike. And that's not just true in one school, it's true of all schools. As you look throughout the year, you'll also see spikes that happen in March. March tends to be a pretty long month, but we also know that when we have our next meeting with you, and we can break out by behaviors, we can look at the date of the referral, the time of day, and start looking for patterns. We can look at locations, and I'll give you a few, but there are many. For example, is it maybe right now during COVID times we're not eating in the cafeteria, or we're modifying the way we do lunchtime, but taking a look at sometimes playground or the bus or the classroom. You can even narrow it down to the referrals by faculty. So as we do deeper dives with each building in our PBIS teams, we can take a look at all of those factors and then see where things are needed. So, you know, it's just a time right now after coming back into school and readjusting. When you take a look at those numbers, you can see for Case Wiley in the high school that in some cases, you know, we're doing somewhat better, but we're still in a pandemic, and behaviors right now, having kids reacclimate to a school schedule and coming back in, it has been difficult for some students. But with that said, go back to pre-pandemic numbers, you'll see it's time to hit the reset button on the PBIS framework. And Stacy is doing that with the PBIS district-wide committee. Stacy, do you have anything that you want to add to this?
You know, looking at the numbers, one of the things people are talking about right now is the need for additional supports for our students, and that is clear. But you know, in looking at this data with Patty, one of the things we talked about is that this is not something that's new to us with the pandemic. This is something that we knew even before the pandemic, and trying to figure out how to address it. And the pandemic sort of hit pause on it for a little bit because we didn't have as many students in school, but trying to figure out with Tracy Largett through BOCES what that reset is going to do for our district in terms of resetting expectations, making sure everybody is on the same page, both staff and students, and that we have clarity in our expectations will hopefully right the ship in some instances, but then also figuring out what interventions are needed for students who, for which the expectations, you know, just they're not enough.
So, haven't gotten there, haven't really had the money. Is that something maybe we can look at budget purposes this year? Maybe, I don't know if that'll help in any way to kind of coordinate or help uplift more programming.
One of the people that I would love to have you meet, and she's still getting her bearings because she started on November 1st, but I'll share with you in my report some of the things that she's been doing. But through the My Brother's Keeper program grant that we have in place, that position really is, it's a family and community engagement liaison. And the programs around it are really designed to address not just student engagement, but needs from all sorts of lenses. So I've invited her to join us at the PBIS trainings that are upcoming with the district-wide reset. And she's already done some really great things as a starter piece. And she's got additionally great ideas for moving forward and how to really sit down with some of our students. And not just the ones who are, you know, doing really well and not having an issue, and not the ones who are having the extreme issues, but the ones who also need attention as well, who sometimes fly under the radar. And so just really being thoughtful and mindful about how we address all of our students and their needs and their wants.
Just a question. Is there any way, is it easy to obtain the data on how many of these are the number of students that it is?
That's too, yes.
I mean, so if somebody's maybe 10 vendors,
Yes.
numbers might be a little misleading.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying?
We can do that for you too. So when we drill down, we'll do it also, we'll just be generic about it.
Right,
Student A, student B, so we can be generic with numbers. Yep.
Right.
That's a great point too.
I have some of that. So I can share that with you.
We had it in all different formats, but we started with tonight thinking we'll give you just a big overview, and then we can get into, we want to talk about academics at our next meeting for data, and then come back to this, because it will also be a good time, January, February, as we approach March, knowing that our numbers spike. It's a good reminder that we need to make sure that we're reviewing all of the strategies within each school. Sure, and I'm really glad that you're both here tonight, because my first talk is about safety being a priority in the district. So thank you for coming tonight and sharing your story, and I hope that you'll call me tomorrow and we can follow up, because we have a district-wide safety committee that we are constantly reviewing and looking at safety protocols. We have our Pbis team framework where we review things as well. But in addition to that, we're always making sure that we're up to date on our training, reviewing safety practices, working with both our SROs at the high school and at Case Middle School and our DARE officer as well. So it's an ongoing, everyday, making sure that that is our priority. Over the past 5 years, we've spent a lot of time on safety and updating different protocols. For example, you've heard me talk about the code blue teams for medical emergencies in each building and making sure that all of our AEDs in each building are up to date, but also taking a look at, with our Dignity for All Students Act, making sure that with code of conduct that we have things in place as well. So back on November 17th, I attended a 3-hour webinar with the New York State Ed Department on emergency response planning, and it really was a great review of building level and district level building safety plans. That was on November 17th. So in New York State, I think we do a good job at reviewing those protocols and things in place. It wasn't even really a couple weeks later, and we had a tragedy at Oxford High School in Oakland County, just northwest of Detroit on November 30th. So our condolences go out to that school. But I also want to acknowledge one of our high school students, Connor Hall, who just participated in the New York State Music Orchestra in Rochester. And one of the things that they did as an orchestra, their closing event was they did a little tribute of the Oxford, it's called their Oxford Fight Song. And in 1 hour's time, these kids got together, and when listening to this, I thought it was a professional orchestra. So I thought it was a nice tribute. The school was asked, what could you do? And they said, if you could do anything, we want to hear that fight song, that tribute song. And so knowing that one of our own students got to participate in that and acknowledge that to that school, I just wanted to acknowledge Connor for all of his hard work and dedication in that experience. It's just a great reminder for all of us that if you hear something or if you see something, you need to say something. So again, I'm beyond grateful that you're here tonight to say something, because if we don't know about it, it's hard to fix. And if we do know about it and we're not addressing it, it needs to be brought to the superintendent level so that I can address it. That's my job. That's what I'm here for. So I appreciate again that you're here. Yesterday, we put out a mental health newsletter with a focus on stress during the holidays. Right now, it is a very stressful time for students, parents, families, the community. And so we'll continue to put out those resources, because that newsletter is packed with all of the resources that we provide within the district, or places to go within our community. If people are feeling stressed right now, there's a lot of support. And if that newsletter isn't enough, reach out. There's tons of people within the district that you can reach out to. And if all else fails, call my office and we'll lead you into one of those places to help you get the support that you need. I'd also like to thank Tim Rinton, the director from Jefferson County Community Services. I spent some time working with him, and sometimes we have some serious mental health issues that need to be addressed immediately. And so we now have one staff member that is on the list to be able to do pickup calls. So she's now on the county list. Prior to that, we didn't have anyone. And so if we had a student in crisis, sometimes it would be a 2 to 3 hour wait and waiting for somebody. And we all know that when a student is in crisis, they need help then. So we now have that in place district-wide. So it's one person, but it's a start, and it's into getting that need met. I attended the Jefferson Lewis School Board Association Superintendent School Boards roles virtually with Maria and Ambrose, and I thought that was a great training session. We actually did a lot of Family Feud rounds. It was a little difficult because the three of us were virtual, and there were a few people in person, and then the rest of us were virtual. But it was a really, I don't know if Maria or Ambrose want to share out anything, but I thought it was very, very well done, productive meeting.
I thought it was a nice overview of the relationship between the superintendent, school administration, and the board. I found very valuable.
I don't think that it seemed like there's so much there that
Yeah.
they did an individual board retreat. If there's still would have been missing information. There's a lot to it. But it was good stuff.
I had a conversation with Becky Rose, one of our high school music teachers in the past week. We discussed the safety protocols for Little Mermaid Junior, which will be happening at the end of March in Watertown High School. So we're just starting out the ground level with that. I think auditions are coming up pretty soon. And then Tina and I will work with Mrs. Rose on making sure that because it's an extracurricular and we're still in a high red zone, those students will need to be tested, and we'll follow our safety protocols for that as well. We found out the Friday after Thanksgiving. We didn't actually find out until the Monday after Thanksgiving, that on Friday night at 10:30 after Thanksgiving, that our company that was doing our COVID testing closed their doors. So when we came into work on Monday morning, we found out that they were no longer. And we have a new testing company. It's called Concentric by Ginkgo. And I'd like to thank Tina for all of her efforts on getting that up and running. We're now on round number 2 or 3 because you use Binex first and then we did the other. The good news is with this company, we'll be allowed to use the same testing that we were using with the prior company, with Assure. But Dawn Angelo and Tina Tyrell have all been working very hard on that model. We're hoping that we're going to be able to test staff this week, but there is a possibility that we may have to postpone until next week. And it's all logistics, we're just waiting. Tina got the FedEx labels today to send things back, but we still can't get into the portal where we need to enter the information. So I appreciate your diligence in getting that up and running.
Can I just ask a quick question
Sure.
on that? Does the state ding you for that if you don't upload information or?
We have not received any feedback on that.
Okay.
I think we're showing our due diligence.
Right.
In trying to get established with this company. I've over communicated with them, I think so. I mean, I think that's compelling. But no, we have not received any word from the state at all.
Okay.
We're making an effort. We are still testing bus drivers. We have a very small number. So we have some Binex cards that we're using for that, which is great. So we're still able to test certain groups, but we hope to get back up and running very soon.
I attended the National Honor Society induction at Watertown High School. I'm going to pass this around. We have a lot of students that were inducted in this past round. The whole ceremony was 1 hour. It was after school. Everybody was socially distanced in the auditorium. Some of the students that were already members of the society got up and did a very short introduction of the inductee, and they came up and signed the book, and the whole process went very, very quickly despite the number of students that were being inducted. So they, missed out on a little bit with COVID. So this is a little bit of making up for some of those ceremonies that had been canceled last year. And we're in a good spot right now going forward to continue. And there's 2 more things. I visited the Festival of Trees, and I'd like to congratulate Lori and your team for your talents in decorating one of the trees. It was great job. I actually sent her a picture, and one of the lacrosse sticks weren't quite right. And she made my way to the other side by the time she read the text. She's like, "Can you straighten that up?" Sure, I'll go with that. But in that, I'd also like to commend the staff at Sherman, Starbuck, and North. They all did an amazing job with the trees that they decorated as well. I've been on the website. I actually I had a couple bids going, and I actually got outbid on all the trees that I thought would be really great. That is one of the trees that I purchased in the past. Although it doesn't look exactly like it did when I purchased it, the wear and tear of storing it gets changed up every year. But these are great trees to have out in the community, and they're for good causes, both for the hospital and the YMCA. So a good way to support. And I'll just pass that around for any of you that didn't get an opportunity to stop by. And then the last thing, I missed it. I didn't have it at the last meeting, but Mrs. Keenan sent her Thanksgiving dinner on how to cook a turkey that her kindergartners do. And also at the last board meeting, we didn't recognize, but we acknowledged that Mrs. Keenan will be retiring at the end of the school year. So I'm not sure what we'll do going forward without this book, but you have to read it because this is amazing on 5-year-olds on how to cook a turkey. And I probably shouldn't have read this before I cooked the turkey dinner because my turkey was not cooked. But it's just, I think this is great. Go to the store and put it in the oven for 64 minutes or cook it in the stove for 30 minutes. And I think that's what my turkey looked like, even though it had been several hours. So a great book, and I commend Mrs. Keenan for all of her years of service and everything that she did as well.
Okay, thank you. Assistant Superintendent for Instruction.
So in front of you, you have a 2-week calendar. This is the work of our K-12 principals and some brainstorming sessions about how to recognize different cultures and holidays that are celebrated, and not only create awareness around those and recognize those in our community who might celebrate holidays other than Christmas, but also to educate our students about different holidays and cultural practices that exist in communities that they might experience either during their K-12 educational careers or when they graduate Watertown High School and move on to either higher education or employment or enlistment anywhere else. So our first week is really around revolving around holidays around the world. And so we'll be recognizing Diwali, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, and Eid in honor of different cultures and families who might practice any of those. And then the following week is a Spirit Week. We'll have one day recognizing Christmas as well as one of those cultural practices and or holidays. And then we'll really go into things that will be universal that all students can participate in. So, you know, wearing plaid or wearing crazy or mismatched socks, wearing pajamas, etc. So this is something that we hope a lot of people and students will partake in so that we can really create unity and celebration in our community around the holiday spirit. As Patty mentioned when she was sharing the discipline data, we are invested in a Pbis district-wide reset this year. This is sort of a double dose of work because not only is it a reset of our Pbis district-wide, and every building committee is participating, so we have 8 teams here going through that. So not only is it really a restart of our Tier 1 processes and reestablishing expectations and supports for our students and making sure that staff is on the same page, it is also doubling as work that we're doing in disproportionality through our special education lens with the suspensions of students, specifically white students with disabilities. So really focusing around that work, we're pulling that all together, and Tracy Larga and LaDonna Richardson, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the other person's name from BOCES, but they've been very helpful. We had our first meeting in November. We'll be meeting again next week. And starting in March and April, we'll move on from resetting Tier 1 practices to going on to Tier 2 and really being strategic and thinking about how do we create common language and practices around interventions and supports for students where Tier 1 doesn't necessarily have the same impact for. Met with Mark Taylor and Jess Brown from CASE about a funding application for our school improvement grant. This is called SIG Enhanced. We did have the small amount of funding received last year, but we really weren't able to utilize it. And this year we're having an even harder time utilizing our SIG funding because of the sub shortages. And it's impossible to get all of the professional development and such around after school hours because there's so much else going on that's professional development as well. So we decided to pass on the application this year because the strands that we're participating in, instructional coaching, one, we still haven't been able to pull our second instructional coach in because we're not able to fill their current position. And just knowing that we wouldn't be able to use that money, it's not something that can be carried over, so it didn't seem worthwhile to move forward with that application. I presented to the administrative cohort with SUNY Oswego on diversity, equity, inclusivity, and belonging last week. I want to thank Olivia Rogi and Sarah Carpenter for hosting me. Tried to make it interactive, and for anybody who's been through the admin cohort with SUNY Oswego, we spent some time with ethical dilemmas and different scenarios revolved around equity practices related to education. I also mentioned to you when Patty was going over discipline data that I would really like you to meet Tiffany Quarles at some point. She is our family and community engagement liaison. She technically is a Cornell Cooperative Extension employee, but she is contracted to Watertown City School District through the My Brother's Keeper grant. So far, she has jumped right in. It's only been 5 weeks of having her here, and it's awesome. She's conducted meetings with students at Case Middle School to really kind of get to know them and address, you know, what are some of your needs that you're thinking about as a middle school student and how to best engage them, what they're interested in. She has planned a paint and sip activity of hot cocoa or over break with students and their families that will take place at the Massey Learning Center. And so that's a nice opportunity for them to come in and really pair together and spend some time as a family, but also, you know, do something that is a school/Cornell sponsored activity. She's also working with Cornell University on something called Brain Days, which is a program that came out originally aligned to My Brother's Keeper program expectations. And it focuses on neuroscience and developmental aspects of engagement and motivation in students. So that will be something that we roll out to our middle and high school students going forward. A professional learning committee met to plan January 28th, 2022. That's an early release day for staff development. The focus of the January and May dates this year are going to be on peers, presenting to peers. So we're going to be reaching out to staff to solicit 1-hour presentations where their colleagues can attend. The topics that we're really hoping to focus on for January 28th revolve around self-care, including mindfulness, nutrition, and staying positive in the face of adversity. We'll be doing some panorama training, classroom management and de-escalation strategies, and diversity, equity, and inclusion sessions. We'll also have Child Mind Institute back with us, who is going to be offering a workshop on resiliency. And we have a small segment of our staff population will be grading the English Regents, so they won't necessarily be able to participate in that. But our Case Middle School Social Studies team will be working on teaching art history. And I think we're doing the legwork and getting that set up. And then lastly, in front of you, you have the December instructional update. It is a shorter instructional update this month. But on page 2, we just wanted to draw your attention to that it's a sneak peek of some of the data that we'll be sharing with you in January. This is the spring 2021 3 through 8 ELA and math performance proficiency rates and participation numbers. We were not subject to the 95% participation rate. No school was this year. So you can see our participation rates are much lower than they ordinarily would be. But we'll go over that in greater detail and disaggregate it for you in January. That's it.
Assistant Superintendent for Personnel and Student Services.
So, tonight, we have several subs. You'll see on the agenda. We're very pleased. We have 9 additional instructional subs. We also have a variety. We've done many interviews over the last, since the last board meeting. Library media specialists, elementary teachers, counselor interviews, nurses, food service workers, maintenance subs, teacher aid subs, special ed. So you'll see some teacher appointments, some instructional appointments here tonight. We're really excited about our new employees coming on board after this evening. We're also very pleased. We rolled out, I did a short presentation at the last board meeting on Panorama. It's an early warning system. And essentially what we did today is we did a survey, and I talked a little bit about this before at the last meeting, but we did a survey based on CASEL's benchmarks, and that's the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And we had students in grades 5 through 12 take a survey today. We had a couple little blips this afternoon because of the global network issues, so our Wiley students will finish up tomorrow morning, or tomorrow during the day, hopefully if that situation gets alleviated. But we did self-efficacy, growth mindset. The questions were focused on self-management, emotion regulation, positive feelings, challenging feelings, supportive relationships. We had about 46 questions on the survey. It took about 16 minutes. So we're really excited about the data that will be garnered here. As Stacy mentioned, we're going to be doing some training in January. We're going to use this data with our people personnel services team, our administrators, and also our teachers and staff. So I'm really interested to take a look at the data garnered by our students there, and we thank teachers and administrators for their cooperation in launching that survey. And of course, as Patty had mentioned, it's been very busy in the COVID world trying to transition to the new lab that we'll be using. We're all ready to go. We're just waiting for access to get into the new system. We have our staff loaded onto a spreadsheet. We're ready to go. We have tests. We're all set, but we're just waiting for that green light. So as soon as we do that, we'll communicate out by Parent Square when testing will take place, some information about the new lab, And then we'll be transitioning all of our athletes and extracurricular groups to that test as well. So it's a waiting game, but I really would like to thank Patty for her support, and also the nurses, Tina and Dawn, and the rest of our nursing staff. Tina and Dawn have really taken a leadership role in that area. They really have done an excellent job. So I'd like to thank them, and I'll keep the board updated on the testing situation as it unfolds.
Thank you. Assistant Superintendent for Finance.
Property tax cap. There's another one that's a double-sided spreadsheet. This is straight off the state comptroller's website, and it is just to try to make it easy to understand. It is a little bit easier if you take a look at the spreadsheet, but that would be our numbers. Over in the right-hand column, you tend to see the 22-23 numbers, which are still subject to change. There is one big piece of the pie missing. But by and large, most of those numbers in there are pretty correct. We start out with the total taxes that we had for this year's tax levy. Then you're going to add in the amount that we would have spent out of reserves, subtract the anticipated reserve amount, and then we're multiplying that by a tax-based growth factor, which is given to us from the state. That's kind of based on anything that you see, your new construction, different tax change statuses, measurable improvements on the taxable property within our district. This year, it is a flat zero. We're the only one in the area that's at. I mean, there's quite a few throughout the state that are all zeros, and you can see it's the first line, and going across from 18-19, it's been on a steady downward trend, and this year we just hit the zero. So that kind of hurts us as far as the amount that we'd be able to increase based off of that factor. After that, you're going to add in our pilots, so our payments in lieu of taxes that we would have as a receivable for this year, and then subtract the capital tax portion. So if you flip your spreadsheet over, this whole thing is where we're calculating our capital levy exclusion, which is essentially going to be all of our debt service payments for the projects that we've had on our bonds. And here's the one big piece of the pie that's missing, is if you look down about 6 or so rows, you have debt service payments to ban and the ban interest. You see there's zeros over in the 22-23 because we will be converting those to bonds and long-term financing, but we don't have those numbers yet. It hasn't gone to sale. We don't know what it's going to be. So you'll see the top two numbers there where it's $3,800,000. You'll see those increase. If it was close to what the ban, we would anticipate the ban payments being, that I would say somewhere between $800,000 and $900,000. So it will increase back over on the tax calculation side. Down about midway, you see capital tax levy exclusion. That's not going to be zero. That's, I don't know, somewhere in the $100,000 range would be my guess for right now. I don't know, because we have to meet with fiscal advisors and kind of see what the market's doing, what they would anticipate. A lot can change in 6 months. Hopefully the rates remain favorable. Then we go by the allowable levy growth factor, which is another one out there. That's going to be, this is where you hear the 2% tax cap. Problem because it's going to be the less CPI or inflation rate or 2%. That's where the cap is. So that's why you always hear 2% tax cap. It's not a cap at 2%. That's just the amount that it caps the levy growth factor there. Then we take out what we anticipate for pilots for the upcoming year, and any carryover, which we've had zero the last couple of years. And then we get rid of the exclusions. So this number, as you see, it looks like it's nominal. It's not going to be the case once we get the ban converted to bond and can input those numbers in here. And then there's still some other adjustments we need to take a look at. On the expense side, okay, this thing from the state comptroller's office is pretty decent as far as trying to explain a very complicated thing. Any questions on the text? Tax is the agenda for things that we want to see. The amount turned over to the cities in the $850,000 range, as opposed to last year was a little over $1 million. I think it was $1,023,000 last year. So hopefully, partly COVID and hopefully returning to normal, plus the city collecting had a very positive impact there. And on the library tax, so we're 175 grand ahead of where we were at the same time last year on the tax collection side. In the library tax, we've collected about 71,000 of the 75, and we'll hopefully cut that check within the next couple of weeks for what we have received, and then as the rest is, we'll pay it out on a quarterly basis, probably. Susie mentioned the ESSA transparency was submitted. Haven't heard anything back from them yet. It's not technically due until December 31st, so it'll be a while probably. Questar, we received our draft risk assessment, reviewed that, drafted a corrective action plan, so that's kind of ready to go. We usually look at that along with our internal audit, so it's still 5 to 6 months away before we typically would do that. We had a capital projects meeting, Patty, the architects, Brian, and just kind of went through some of the stuff. They were trying to get a jump on roofing materials and trying to get stuff set up for 2023, encouraging us to use TIPS, which would be a cooperative purchasing, similar to Sourcewell or some other ones that you may have heard of. I've seen conflicting legal opinions before, so we opted to reach out to ours, and essentially it kind of leaned the way that we were going, we the district, and that we would want to bid stuff out. We don't want to be the guinea pigs or the test subject for, we don't want to be the test case for, not meeting OSC bidding requirements and stuff like that. It's not something we want. So, well, it will add time, which is why I think the other ones, the other side, architects and everybody were trying to go the other route, piggybacking and stuff like that. So, speaking of OSC, I have heard from them. It's still wrapping up a couple things there, but hopefully, I don't know when, but we shouldn't have too many more questions at this point. So we should get that report sometime in the near future.
All right, thank you. Moving on to items for the consent agenda. Items resolved that consent agenda items A, B, C, D, E, and F are tabled. I have a motion, please. And a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to items for board action. Whereas board policy 4401, general procurement standards, allows the standardization throughout the district for reasons of efficiency or economy. Whereas buildings and grounds have solicited estimates for maintenance services that fall within the realm of standardization due to history and efficiency, and recommends the following: elevator maintenance, cone staircase, fire extinguisher inspection, netto fire equipment, generator maintenance, pen power, floor machine preventative maintenance, Hilliard. Therefore, be it resolved that the use of vendors noted and for reasons standardization are hereby accepted and approved. Can I have a motion, please?
Sure.
And a second?
Members,
Thank you. Any discussion?
Just had a question for Josh on that. I noticed you used the word very competitive. Is there any requirement?
We did get bids on this, but this is actually kind of one of those things that we'll see. It will likely be in the final report and the standardization thing. I didn't see anything that we did wrong, but would recommend us having this language in so that we can just get a hold of code if we have an elevator issue instead of having to each time go out to bid. So that's really where this is being driven from. So
What's awesome is by the time we get the report, the corrective actions will all be done. Well, not all, but most taken care of a lot of them. So thanks.
There's still a couple more standardizations that we haven't got to yet, but since Maria went over to buildings and grounds, just some of the job with it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of Superintendent of Schools, Patricia B. LaBar, the Board of Education hereby approves the following: resignations, retirement, leaves of absence, probationary and instructional, permanent, appointments, term of non-probationary instructional, probationary non-instructional, provisional, substitutes instructional, substitutes non-instructional, and their coaching boards. Can I have a motion, please? And a second? Lori, thank you. Any discussion?
Just have a question.
Sure.
In regards to appointments made prior to the vote, is there any issue for the district there? I mean, are these people actually working?
You mean retroactive?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
But is there any issue for the district there? Someone is working and that has not been approved yet?
Not to my knowledge. We can certainly check into that, but. They have all the credentials and the, let's talk about a civil service role, maybe a maintenance person who's working in a position and retroactively filling the spot of a custodial position. They have the qualifications there. I can check into that.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Resolved that an hourly minimum wage increase to $13.20 per hour effective December 31, 2021 is hereby approved. Can I have a motion, please?
Lori?
And a second? Any discussion on this? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Resolved that the approval of extracurricular advisors at Watertown High School, Mr. Wicker and Jocelyn Reedy, freshman class advisors, Jocelyn Reedy, Gender Sexuality Alliance Club, and Sissel Book Club are hereby approved. Can I have a motion, please?
Going.
And a second? Ambrose, thank you. Any discussion on this? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Resolved that the tuition rate for the grandfathered non-resident students for the 2021-22 school year are hereby set as follows. Grades K through 6, $3,725. Grades 7 through 12, $2,850. Can I have a motion, please? Randy, thank you, Ambrose. Bless you, Cully. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Resolved that donations from Cavalier Education Fund to Northern New York Community Foundation for $550 for each K-4 building in the district. The grant is designated support for the purchase of supplies and materials to support teachers and programs in enhanced student learning. These donations are gratefully accepted and approved and will be acknowledged in writing. Can I have a motion, please? Susie Ambrose. Did you, Ambrose, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Any discussion? Any thoughts on what the buildings are going to do with this money at this point in time?
Last year, Stacy worked with the K-4 principals.
So we decided last year, we purchased mini portable dot cams for teachers who were teaching remotely and needed additional projection materials. But I will meet with building principals next week at their monthly meeting, and we'll discuss what we do so that we're equitable across all K-4 buildings for that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions?
Yes, Randy.
Any noes? Whereas the school district tax collector for the Watertown City School District has submitted under oath that it will approve business December 7th, 2021, current school taxes amounting to $14,932,590.09 plus interest of $4,791.42 of accounts of 500, and that said date $1,046.62 plus interest of $10,698.62 remain uncollected and unpaid with respect to properties located within the city of Watertown, and such taxes amounting to $298,886.02 plus interest of $6,005.09 remain uncollected and unpaid with respect to properties outside the city of Watertown in the towns of Levy, Amelia, Rutland, and Watertown, amounting in all to $847,976.35. Such taxes and interest uncollected and unpaid, and whereas the board has caused said statement to be compared with the original school tax rolls, and said statement has been found to be correct, resolved that so much of said statement as pertains to unpaid taxes levied on real property located within the city of Watertown be transmitted with a copy of this resolution to the comptroller of the city of Watertown, and so much of said statement as pertains to the unpaid taxes levied on real property located outside the city of Watertown to be transmitted with a copy of this resolution to the treasurer of Jefferson County, and that each of said treasurers be and hereby are authorized and directed pursuant to section 1322 of the real property tax law to enforce the collection of all such uncollected and unpaid school taxes pertaining to those properties located within their respective jurisdiction, with penalties and interest provided by law, and that each of them pay over to the treasurer of the Watertown City School District at least once each month all monies realized from the collection after retaining therefrom for the city of Watertown or for Jefferson County, as the case may be, the 5% penalty authorized by said law.
Can I have a motion, please? Lori. Second.
Cool.
Any discussion on that? Yeah. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Whereas the school tax district tax collector of the Watertown City School District has submitted under oath that at the close of business on December 7th, 2021, current Flower Memorial Library taxes amounting to $71,085.76 have been collected by her, and that at said date taxes amounting to $2,546.43 remain uncollected and unpaid with respect to properties located within the city of Watertown, and such taxes amounting to $1,367.81 remain uncollected and unpaid with respect to properties outside the city of Watertown in the towns of Levy, Amelia, Rutland, and Watertown, amounting in all to $3,914.24. Such taxes and interest uncollected and unpaid, and whereas the board has caused said statement to be compared with the original school tax rolls, and said statement has been found to be correct, resolved that so much of said statement as pertains to unpaid taxes levied on real property located within the city of Watertown be transmitted with a copy of this resolution to the city, to the comptroller of the city of Watertown, and so much of said statement as pertains to the unpaid taxes levied on real property located outside the city of Watertown to be transmitted with a copy of this resolution to the treasurer of Jefferson County, and that each of said treasurers be and hereby are authorized and directed pursuant to section 1322 of the real property tax law to enforce the collection of all such uncollected and unpaid school taxes pertaining to those properties located within their respective jurisdiction, with penalties and interest provided by law, and that each of them pays over to the treasurer of the Watertown City School District at least once each month all monies realized from such collection after retaining therefrom for the city City of Watertown, full disclosure in county is the case may be, the 5% penalty authorized by said law.
Can I have a motion for that one, please? Thank you, and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? I need to abstain from that one, Michelle. Okay. Any nays? I also need to abstain. Motion carries. We have the resolutions. Okay, thank you. So you got some upcoming dates of this Friday. There's no school for students for parent-teacher conferences. 21st, we have our next meeting. That was at Knickerbocker with a policy meeting directly preceding it, also at Knickerbocker. Is this the first year we've had a second meeting in December? Or?
Yes.
Okay. So it's new for some of us. Holiday recess coming up, 24th to the 3rd of January, and then buildings closed on December 24th itself and December 31st for New Year's Eve. Additionally, Michelle last week uploaded for me into Board Docs a copy of the Nisba Superintendent evaluation and a copy of the Board of Ed evaluation. So typically at the 6-month mark, we do an evaluation on Patty against her board goals that she provided for us, just to kind of take a pulse of where she is and what we think we need to continue to do. We've never done a board evaluation. We did have a couple years ago professional development, and it was suggested, and just kind of the ball dropped from there on that. So I think it's a good time to kind of do a board evaluation and see where we are, see where we stand. And I think from that we need to make some board goals moving forward into the next year to give us a little bit of direction. So those are up in Board Docs. If you could take a look at them and maybe have them complete by the first meeting in January, that'll give us about a month, and then we can discuss those at that time in executive session. All right, Lori, I'm going to start with you. Anything to add?
Yeah, just when we were talking about safety, I know that we're doing protocols, there's things coming out of the doors and all of that. The question is, with cameras, do we have cameras outside all of the buildings all over? And how far do they go out? I feel like if there's schools and stuff, just because we're saying I have heard of fights happening on Bridge Street and stuff as well.
So I think it depends on which building you're at. Mm-hmm. But I'll give you a few examples, and then if you want a specific, like if you gave me a specific location, if you're the side building like at Case, that actually goes right over to School Street, where you can see everything. That little, like they used to have a corner where kids would right there. That camera can go that far, and then there's a lot of cameras strategically placed around the athletic field that go in different directions. I'll look to see if it goes to where this gentleman was talking about earlier. But in various buildings at the outside, like behind North, for example, there's a camera, and it's so detailed that if you can get the license plate numbers off cars that are in that parking lot. So just depending if you ever wanted someone to come in and show you at some point some of those, or if you wanted to have a meeting with somebody to learn a little bit more about those. Because it's sometimes they're on the side of the building and I don't think a lot of people are even aware that they're there, which is okay.
No, that's good. I was thinking before, and then when he started talking, I was like,
Okay.
Just want to thank everybody for keeping our kids in school. Task. And Sharon looks great. I go by it every day, and I think that entrance really enhances the building, and I'm sure it's great security, traffic control. Congratulations.
It's getting there. It's not there
Well,
yet.
it looks great from the street.
Yeah, not as excited as you are, but hopefully it'll
really
get
looks
there.
nice.
It's been a long process for that one, for all of them actually. It's been a very long, tedious project.
Good.
Ambrose.
All set, thank you.
And thank you to Patty and your family for our little goodies.
No, my husband was out hunting, I take full credit. It is my recipe, for the record, that he stole from me.
I got it.
I'll let you know.
Yeah.
All right, so at this time, I need a motion for an executive session for the purposes of discussing the employment history of a particular individual. Lori and Susie, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
I need 3 for